That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about The Outlaw Johnny Black. It's the third film directed by Michael Jai White, which is being released courtesy of Samuel Goldwyn Films on September 15th, 2023.
I know Michael Jai White directed Black Dynamite.
No, he wrote Black Dynamite with the co-writer of this film, Byron Min. Black Dynamite was directed by Scott Sanders, and then there's also a TV series.
So then what are the two films he directed?
Never Back Down 2
Oh.
and Never Back Down No Surrender.
Okay.
I've only seen the first Never Back Down film, so I would assume that Mr. White has elevated the claptrap that I did see from the first film, but I haven't experienced them.
The premise of this movie: hell-bent on avenging the death of his father, Johnny Black vows to gun down Brett Clayton and becomes a wanted man in the process while posing as a preacher in a small mining town that's been taken over by a notorious land baron. That sounds very busy, and this movie is very busy.
It is a busy film.
What is your pull quote?
In a moderately long but often unexpectedly amusing homage to spaghetti westerns and blaxploitation cinema, showcasing the magnetic screen presence of Michael Jai White.
Mine's similar. An enjoyable, if not overly long, modern interpretation of blaxploitation. Yeah, there's a lot to like about this movie. I did think it was like 30 to 45 minutes too long, though.
Because it's, 2 hours and 12 minutes? It's over the 2 hour mark. I mean, we're getting into Sergio Leone territory of running time, and I don't know that the plot really supports it.
The plot doesn't support it, but there's enough humor, and what I really enjoyed about this movie is it seems like everyone involved is like fond of the filmmaker, like they're doing favors for him. We have Tommy Davidson, Jill Scott, Anika Noni Rose, like some really cool people are in this film. Glenn Turman,
some voice work from Louis Gossett Jr.,
Kim Whitley,
yeah,
and everyone, even like very minor supporting characters, seem like they're having fun. Mm-hmm. Russell Peters is in the thing, playing an indigenous person.
They did the indigenous people dirty.
They did, movie. But I mean, it's problematic, but in a way that makes sense if they're, harkening back to blaxploitation films. So I really enjoyed the fact that the cast seems like they're having fun, and there is a lot of humor embedded in this 2+ hour movie.
Yeah, Barry Bostwick, Michael Madsen shows up as someone named Dutch towards the end that flabbergasted me. I wasn't quite sure but yeah, it's very amusing.
The premise I read is basically it. So Michael Jai White plays Johnny Black. We're in the Wild Wild West, like 1800s, late 1800s, I'm assuming. Mm-hmm. And we see that he's trying to avenge the death of his father, played by Glenn Turman, mm-hmm. who was murdered by this character, Brett Clayton. And he ends up in a town where he gets into like a scuffle trying to defend some, as he's referring to, indies, referring to the indigenous people. And he gets accused of murder. So he's about to be hung when he's rescued. Mm-hmm. And he gets involved with, paired up with this preacher man.
Mm-hmm. Played by the co-writer, Byron Min.
And
Reverend Percy.
The preacher ends up getting kidnapped by the natives. Mm-hmm. And we can get into his little subplot. But Michael Jai White ends up pretending to be the preacher and goes to this town. And meets two women, basically, who are sisters, played by
Anika Noni Rose and Erica Ash, playing Jessie and Bessie Lee.
Who are obviously stunning, mm-hmm. and they are a bit smitten by him. And there's this, love triangle, which I think, because we have the plot of, the preacher man, plus this love triangle, plus Outlaw Johnny Black trying to find Brett Clayton. So you have these three main storylines that are a lot.
Brett Clayton, as the man whose name is on a bullet that he's carrying, really falls to the background. The way back.
Well, way back, because it was more than an hour when I was like, what happened to Brett Clayton? And then all of a sudden we hear, but sort of the climax is Barry Bostwick. So a fourth storyline is that Barry Bostwick is this land baron, as he's described, who wants to buy this land that the black people in this town own, and a church is the main property on top of it, because unbeknownst to them, there's oil underneath. But there's a big climax where not only does Johnny Black terminate Barry Bostwick's character, But he also confronts Brett Clayton finally and tells him, because part of Johnny Black's process, like in pretending to be this preacher, and then he gets called out at a moment where he ends up having to give a sermon, and he ends up giving a sermon because Johnny Black is not religious at all. But when he gives this sermon, he recalls what his father, Glenn Turman, used to say, and he gives this very beautiful speech, which I wrote down a line from it about forgiveness. So he's resigned to the fact that he doesn't need to kill Brett Clayton to move on.
But when Brett shows up, it's like, it's probably better if you kill this man.
And he does. So all's well that ends well, because now this community gets to keep all this money they're going to make from the oil, and they are very fond of Johnny Black. So now he's going to be a part of this community. And then in the end, he gives like a little speech about how this town, I think called Hope Springs, is going to be a mecca for all kinds of people to feel safe and thrive. So it's a happy ending.
Yeah.
But yeah, it feels like there is a lot going on.
Yeah, it hits it, especially after the hour at the 90-minute mark, it starts feeling like, okay, could we wrap this up? But
yeah, for sure.
But that said, there's a lot going on even in the snippets of the background of the script, because when he's about to be hanged earlier on and they're reading out the charges against him, Randy Couture is one of the men reading these charges out to them, and one of them is improper white woman eye contact and kung fu treachery.
Yeah, the crimes he's being charged with are improper white woman eye contact and kung fu treachery.
And he kicks some guy's ass who it seems like he's about to use a Rachel epithet, and you hear him in the background go, I was going to say nincompoop.
Yeah, he was about to call him the N-word, and then he goes, no, I was going to say nincompoop. Even before that, when the reason Johnny Black is in trouble is because he sees some indigenous people who he's referring to as Indies being like attacked. So he's like, well, damn, I gotta go defend these people. So he goes out there and gets into a fight. But one of the Indies is like this like gay white boy, like this little twink white boy.
In apparently a Mary McDonald dances with wolves situation.
A Party City costume, which I thought was funny. Then we see that Russell Peters is like the leader of one of these indigenous tribes, and we know Russell Peters is not, he's Indian, but so I thought that was funny. And then his child, Russell Peters' child, who I'm assuming we're supposed to interpret as being like a two-spirit person.
Yes.
So like, you know, they have this man cast sort of doing drag, and Russell Peters wants
Reverend Percy
to marry
it's very
his daughter.
John Candy as Eldona and
yes,
Nothing But
and
Trouble.
Nothing But Trouble. But I thought that, you know, I'm sure people will have a problem with it, but I think within the context of this movie that is sort of a callback to a certain type of movie, I will say it does feel a little 2000 and late. Like this movie feels like it would have been more funny in 2009. But,
sure.
But maybe they wrote it back in 2000.
Yeah, maybe. But it's giving me a little bit of Melvin Van Peebles early films, but who didn't really make comedies, but mixed with Fred Williamson in the Boss movies. And energy-wise, it's somewhere between something as ridiculous as a million ways to die in the West, and then The Harder They Fall, by James Samuel.
And it does, you know, Michael Jai White is so good on screen because he's just really nice to look at, and I think he's a good actor, and he's very charming.
It made me think that maybe he would have made a better fit in Antoine Fuqua's remake of The Magnificent Seven as opposed to Denzel Washington, I think.
Oh, sure. But lots of funny moments. We get a part where like a horse dies and then it literally kicks a bucket. Then when the preacher is showing Johnny Black that he has a girlfriend, Bessie, Michael Jai White is like, Bessie, that's a fat woman's name. And then when the preacher shows Johnny a picture of Bessie, she's obviously beautiful, and then that's when he's like, does she know what you look like? They have a very funny exchange.
Erica Ash is a scene stealer.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
She's giving me Raja O'Hara a little bit.
There's a moment where she finds out that he's also been sort of like
wooing her sister.
Wooing Anika Noni Rose, and her reaction is
it's good.
Very funny.
It's good.
Someone needs to make a clip out of that.
Comedy gold. And you know, both of the Anika Noni Rose and Erica Ash had character arcs in Family Reunion.
Oh.
And then And and then Michael J. White obviously was in Why Did I Get Married with Jill Scott. Jill Scott could have been utilized a little bit more.
Jill Scott's in the movie as a brothel madam.
The saloon girl.
And she looked like she was having fun. And, her voice is so powerful and that laugh. And she's so beautiful. So, yeah, I could have used more of her.
And Tommy Davidson.
Tommy Davidson is always funny to me.
And he was in Black Dynamite as well.
This makes me want to rewatch Black Dynamite.
Oh, it's good. Little Richard. It's good.
Whomever was in charge of the score, I thought they did a good job because it was amusing.
Michael Bearden, who is the musical director for a lot of Lady Gaga stuff, and he shows up as the piano player.
Oh, well, good job, person. I thought that when Johnny Black shows up to the town pretending to be the preacher, there's a really funny scene with him and Kim Whitley and another actor because he doesn't know the Bible, so he's trying to work his way around reciting verses, and there's a moment when he's trying to recite a verse, but then he thinks it's a song, but really it's psalm, like Psalm. That exchange I thought was very funny.
Because is it the local sheriff is suspicious about him, so he's trying to prove that he is?
Yes. Russell Peters is this Native American person. Because remember from the 80s, those ads where you'd see like an indigenous person crying over littering. We get a scene like that in this movie. Again, it does feel very like, maybe 20 years ago.
And the sisters have a brother, Elmer.
Oh my gosh, who's like I think he was kicked in the head by a horse, so he's a little scrambled.
And then Barry Bostwick's big scheme, because it's a mostly black community, and he's trying to strong arm the Lee sisters into signing the deed for their land. And their father was Louis Gossett Jr., who's only shows up as a voice. But he calls some gang in to get him saying WWRBBM, white women raped by black men.
Yeah, they use that acronym more than once.
he's accusing, even though there's no white women that live in the town.
Right.
I think it could have gone a lot stronger in that kind of recuperative direction.
Yeah.
But it's still a lot of fun, and I think disarmingly intelligent in a way that you're not expecting based on the tone either.
No. The preacher, when he tries to escape his new two-spirit bride, he's in like a bird costume, which I thought was funny because it looks kind of raggedy.
It looks like an enterprising second-grade teacher had made.
Yes, and then we see him, it looks like he's going to try to fly off a cliff, but he just like dives into the water. I thought all that was funny. Something else. Well, we see him in that bird costume riding a goat. Then we see that in this town, there's like a laundry store, but the signage
in Mandarin
is like in Chinese script. It would appear. I thought that was really funny.
There's a lot of attention in the details. That's fun.
When Bessie sees Michael J. White without his shirt on, she gets very hot.
She gets the vapors.
And then she comes back and brings him some buns, like baked buns. But the innuendo is like very sexual. Mm-hmm. I thought that was funny.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and what is it? Anika Noni Rose. I'm gonna write a telegram. Just the line delivery is very much understands where they're going with these characters.
Yes, yeah. Then when the preacher finally shows up and is like, "Wait, he's not the preacher. I'm the preacher." But then Michael J. White has to play it off. So he says, "Well, his name is Deacon. He's my deacon. Well, what's his name? Deacon." And then they confuse the first and last name. So he's like, "Well, his first and last name are Deacon, so his full title is Deacon. And then they throw the third on top of it. Shit like that I think is funny.
In that little bit when that's introduced is kind of flat, but then later when Michael J. White's forgetting who he's supposed to be acting and starts shouting out Deacon.
Yes.
It's stupid, but it's fun.
I do have to comment on the hair because, they're all, like many of the characters are wearing like Afro wigs. Uh-huh. And it fully looks like at the end of the day of shooting, the costume designer or the stylist took those wigs and put them somewhere and they probably got smushed. So then some of those wigs look smushed like they were in like a box. And
it's clear that they didn't have the biggest budget. There's one special effects scene where there's an explosive device that doesn't look the best, but it works. It works fine. It was shot by Keith L. Smith, who notably was the cinematographer on many episodes of Black Jesus. So shout out to him.
And I like Black Jesus.
Who I swear I saw Black Jesus. That actor is it Gerald Slink Johnson. I swear I saw him
on the strike line,
about to walk up to the Paramount Studios strike line.
Maybe it was him.
Dressed as Black Jesus.
So part of the sermon Johnny Black gives is about forgiveness. He says, I was walking around holding hot coals that was burning no one but me. And that I thought that his speech was quite moving, actually.
Both, and Glenn Turman kind of has the same sentiment that he's repeating, but yeah.
I did think, though, that because this, the introductory plot line about this revenge, this act of revenge and Brett Clayton, when we finally do see Brett Clayton be killed, it felt very anticlimactic, especially because the movie's long and it feels long. So I was disappointed with that.
That's kind of how I felt about The Harder They Fall, too. The third act is daddy-related issues where it comes down to the showdown. That's like, almost everything else is more interesting than that.
The final, when Johnny Black is saying now that Hope Springs will be like a beacon of hope, he says that, we even welcome Chinese people and Chinese-looking people. So stupid. But yeah, my overall thought is that this was a fun enough movie that is too long, but I think if you're in the mood, this could make a really fun Saturday afternoon screening.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe before dinner.
I agree.
Yeah, what would you give this movie?
2.5, but on the fresh side.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it 2.5 out of 5 because it could use some work, but I do think it's worth a watch. Anything else?
No.
Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.